My sighted fiancé is a professional 3D VFX artist, so he's going to describe to me what 3D looks like. Grab a cup of tea and let's chat disability. Hey gorgeous, and welcome back to my channel. I have got Ollie Bobs on here today.
Hello.
once and for all, to tell me what 3D looks like, because it dawned on me the other day that I've kind of forgotten in the 7 years of my blindness what 3D images look like, and he models them for a living every single day of his work life currently. You've been in the industry for about 3 years now.
About 3 years.
Yeah, so do you think you could describe to me and lovely other people who have maybe never seen 3D or been blind since birth? I know that a lot of people have been asking me, and I thought, who's the perfect person?
Indeed. So, let's think of, let's go right down to basics.
Okay.
So, what actually is 3D?
Yeah.
So, 3D is 3 dimensions. So, you've got in front of you, so from forwards to backwards, that's your first dimension, usually referred to as Z. Then you've got the left to right, which is usually called X, and then you've got up and down, which is called Y. So with the combination of those 3, you get 3 dimensions.
So you got X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. So like a piece of paper, like if you drew something on it, would be 2D, and the real world is 3D/4D if we include time.
So, wow, okay. So on a piece of paper, on a 2-dimensional object, you've got X and Y.
Yeah, traditionally, so like when you draw graphs in maths and things like that, it's always X and Y.
And then when you bring it into 3D, because you've got front and back, that becomes the Z-axis.
Yeah, so the depth of something.
Okay. So obviously, being blind, you do experience the 3D world very much so with touch.
Yeah.
And that's how, you know, I feel your arm, that's very much 3D.
Yeah,
I feel Olga, her head, the left ear,
her
the
tail,
right ear. Yeah. Yeah.
Her feet.
Yeah.
So she is 3-dimensional.
Yes. Yeah, and so are we. So how would you go about trying to do that on a computer and making it into film? I don't quite get that.
Well, there's 2 types of 3D in film. You've got stereoscopic 3D, which is when everyone says they're going to see a 3D movie, and they talk about images coming on. Yeah, they talk about images coming out at you, which is probably the closest thing to like a
4D.
In a way, Braille, or like some of the raised painting things that living paintings do and stuff like that.
Living paintings charity, yeah. So when you feel on a page that technically
should be flat.
That should be flat, it's coming out at you, and that's how typically I did geography as a young girl. These maps that were raised for me, and I was feeling maybe the mountains and like the different countries. That's how
3D sort of works when you're watching a TV screen. Obviously you can't feel it, it's all just in the eyes.
It's
and
popping out
else.
at you.
Yeah.
And I've never been able to see this because I remember our very first conversation.
Indeed.
We were on Facebook and I said, well, I'm visually impaired, which means one of my eyes don't work and I can't see 3D. Yeah. And that was, I don't know, you weren't put off by that even though your life is visuals.
Yeah, it was, well, it doesn't change who you are.
Yeah.
So that's stereoscopic 3D. So it's called stereoscopic because you've got, well, it's both eyes, it's 2 eyes. Stereo means 2 of. So you've got the left eye and you've got the right eye.
So for instance, when we have stereo sound, maybe in an app like Soundscape by Microsoft, when you should definitely check that out if you haven't, that is sort of a similar thing because you've got 2 ears, it's stereo. Yeah,
they use like the left, so your left ear to describe things on the left, they use your right ear to describe things on the right, and then they also kind of fake like a 3D sound, don't they?
Yes.
They claim it's which is often used
in front of you or behind you.
Which is usually using things like reverb to fake depth, because the further away something is in a room, like you kind of lose the highs, you lose, like so it becomes more echoey.
So how do you fake that depth with stereoscopic?
Well, with stereoscopic, basically, the further away something is, the further apart it gets between each eye. So when you, like, for the people who are sighted, you can sort of do an experiment where you close your left eye, things like sort of move to the left, and you close your right eye and things will move to the right.
Okay.
And the closer and further away they are, the less they move. So the closer they are, the more it will move, and the further away things are, the less they'll move, which is why it seems like, for example, the moon is often seems like it will be following you because it's so far away that it hardly moves to anyone who looks at it.
See, this is so interesting because we've never discussed this.
Yeah,
So,
it's a strange phenomenon.
It's a weird concept for me because obviously I have seen in 3D when I was like, I don't know, up to the age of 11. So, but obviously that was several years ago now. I'm 24, so that was a good 13 years ago. So in my head, 3D isn't really existent.
Yeah.
And all of the images that I did have, even when I saw in 2D from age 11 to 17, have faded too. So my world of 3D is through your voice, and because you know so much about it, it's really interesting to try and grasp that. So how would you explain modelling 3D then?
Well, it's sort of... Well, because you're looking on a 2D screen,
Yeah.
like it's technically fake 3D, but at the same time, it pretends it's real. So theoretically, I could bring that into a program that 3D prints it and print it out, and then you'd have a model of whatever I've modelled.
Yes.
But in the 3D world on the computer, you just have the X, the Y, and the Z, and then you kind of move things along those axes. So in the world of computer graphics and things, everything is made up of these little tiny dots called vertexes, which are like when you stick like a pinprick, but you can stick it in the air. So you imagine like getting a pin, like just one that you'd stick into a corkboard, but you could stick that in the air, and then you stick a load of those, and then join them all up, and then they form like what's called a polygon, which is like just literally a square, and you make all these squares in real space, sort of like origami.
So sort of like when you're a child and you're in maths and the teacher says to you, let's make a cuboid, and you have to make a sort of diagram of a square for the first time?
Yeah.
Is that... I know that's very stripped down and probably insulting.
It's
but
actually really close to a concept in the world of VFX and 3D modelling called UV unwrapping, which is basically doing that in reverse. So
you're seeing the building blocks then of it. Your job is all about making something look so real to the naked eye
that you shouldn't notice.
You shouldn't notice that it isn't real. So you look at something in a film, and often people say to you, "Oh no, that ship that was real that you built for Red Joan.
Yeah,
you know that looks so real. How does it go from a polygon to looking like someone's filmed a ship in the ocean?"
It's to do with a process called rendering. So whilst it's in the 3D world, I'm basically just working with grey. Like it all just
grayscale.
Yeah, well, it's all just grey. Like I can make it like any other colour I want to, but it's just like single colours. And then it's when you do this thing called rendering, which you bring in lights, you bring in sort of stuff like shadows and that is the thing that changes it from looking like this fake stuff to real. Yeah, you're bringing in textures and things. So it's...
With textures, you look at, say, real life objects. I remember you doing this in university. You'd look at a rock, study the elements and almost
how the light bounces off it
of the texture. And that's what you do on a program. So it's so intuitive. I feel like I know a lot about 3D, even though I can't see it. It's a concept as well as a sighted thing. And I think that's why I don't get upset about it. Because we talk about it in a very logical way, even though some of the things I can't necessarily grasp, we can articulate.
I think so. Like, some concepts are harder than others, but I think overall, throughout the years of just gradually explaining to you what like the process is with little things, you kind of pick it up a little bit more, don't you?
So how do we experience 3D?
So we experience it by touch and by feel and the experience of the real world. The real world is, for all intents and purposes, that we experience 3D.
What then truly embodies 3D that's in our world, us? But
yeah, it is.
But it
is us.
I know, but I feel as if I know it's us, but I feel when I could see 3D, it is definitely not the same experience being blind, even though I have the concept of, the world is in 3D.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Honestly, the closest thing to a 3D film experience you're going to get is a stereo sound experience.
Yes.
So just by sticking earphones on, listening to someone who's recorded like a landscape or something, or even just in real life, you could do this with earplugs. Just basically listening with both ears, then sticking your finger in or an earplug in one ear, blocking it off, then doing the same, letting go of that one, and then blocking the other ear, and then just notice how the sound around you changes. So in this case, we've got birds on our left, but if you mute the left ear, you can hear the birds significantly less, because your right ear is not pointing in that direction.
So your eyes would...
They basically do the same thing. You close one eye and half the scene's gone. And
but you don't... I think when you close one eye, you don't see the image coming at you in an IMAX cinema, do you?
No, it just
3D.
Completely goes flat, because you need both in order to see it. They often notice with people who have only one eye.
I was.
Yeah, exactly. That playing things that need hand-eye coordination, such as cricket or baseball, or things where stuff flies at you, you find it a lot trickier because you can't work out, because it just looks like it's scaling. It could you don't know if it's getting bigger or if it's getting closer.
I had that all the time when I was visually impaired. I would miss things. I couldn't catch anything. I'd misjudge obstacles, and I think because that was my reality, I find 3D harder. In this world, inevitably, I'm going to miss a lot of 3D type experiences because I don't have my vision. What are the things that I would miss and not necessarily know about? Not in a nasty way, but just in a generalised, I wouldn't know about that because I haven't seen for years and years and years. What would I miss out on?
How the sun and moon, they just don't move in the sky for us. They just stick around in the same spot when you're driving along.
I didn't get that, did I?
No, and the same with any sort of really far distant things such as stars or even mountains. Things that are like massively in the distance that you can still see. They don't move. Like, they'll move if you like turn your head away from it, obviously, but they, in terms of like, it will just follow you through the sky, and it's very weird.
See, I didn't get that. I thought if we moved, we'd move around it and you'd see different angles of it, but if it's that far away, you don't see the detail, do you?
Yeah, not at the speed that we're realistically moving. Maybe if you're in a fighter jet, you might notice something, but...
Yeah.
And then, when people talk about how paintings, their eyes follow you.
Yeah.
That's probably another thing, and it's because they're staring directly straight. Your eye kind of tricks you. It's an optical illusion where it thinks your brain sort of processes it as it's watching you, and it's how your brain processes the information coming through. It's a very strange effect, but it's one that I don't know how I'd completely describe or say.
What about then, there was something that went across social media years ago, the dress photo.
The dress.
So explain that to everyone.
Well, we've actually had a sound equivalent now.
The
Yanni
and Laurel
thing.
Lauren and Yanni.
Yeah, it's how your brain processes it. It's the thing that it first picks up on. Like, so if you stare at the white stripe first, it would process it in a certain way. So that's like your Yanni. And then if you if you look at the blue stripe, well, the black stripe, I think it was. I can't remember what colour the original dress was.
Yeah.
But that would be your Laurel. And then you your brain processes it in that way. And then you can't think of it the other way without being like forced into some sort of weird...
I was Laurel and you were Yanni.
Yeah.
It's weird. And why, when you look at checkers, do your eyes hurt?
Oh, that's just... it basically becomes the equivalent of listening to white noise.
Okay.
After a bit. So it gets so small that your eyes can no longer pick out the individual squares. Or like maybe you're just staring at it for too long and you're seeing lots of them crisscross over. But basically your brain starts processing it weirdly, and you're trying to make out this detail in the white noise. Sort of like being at a very crowded restaurant.
Okay.
And it's just, you're trying to listen to multiple conversations at once, and then your brain gets very confused and it can't process it, and you end up with oh, headache.
Do your eyes hurt?
Your eyes don't hurt, but you get a headache, sort of like how you describe when you've got your eyesight headaches, how the front of your head hurts.
Yes.
A bit.
And in the dark, I switch the light off because I'm like, oh, is the light on? Do you want me to switch it on or off? Switch it off at night. You can still see. Why?
Oh, it's...
I don't get it.
I guess it's like sticking earplugs in. Like...
Yeah.
Like, you can
You're
still...
so
you
good
can
at
still
this.
hear. It's just really...
Limited.
Really, really quiet and muffled.
So what do you see?
You basically... The world becomes black and white. Because at that point, the main bits that process colour, they kind of like... They can't do anything. And you've got these other bits of your eyes that can process black and white, but they're much better at seeing in the dark. So you're seeing like this sort of grayscale world, and it's kind of all a bit fuzzy. You can't really make out detail.
Yeah,
it's like really low contrast. It's like trying to hear someone whispering over the sound of rain.
Yeah.
Like you can sort of make it out,
but not really.
Not really.
This is a common thing that we talk about. So if I say to you, Ollie, this room isn't tidy, I've felt loads of things on the table, we need to clean up.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, okay, Lou, let's tidy up. I start tidying, we both start tidying, and then I say to you, didn't you see this though? Like, just genuinely a question, not trying to nag at you. How do you not process that one thing when you see the room as a whole? Do you know what I mean? Not in a nagging way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's a phenomenon, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a type of, they call it something blindness. And it's basically what you're concentrating on, you do see. But the things that you aren't concentrating on, you kind of don't see them. Your brain kind of just filters them out, kind of goes, oh, that's not important. And then sort of like, you know, when people like watch dinosaur movies and they go, don't move, it won't see you.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of... it's sort of like that. Unless you notice it there and it's doing something, you don't notice it. It's sort of like, you know, when you listen to a music track over and over and over again and you begin to notice, like, the stuff they put in the background.
Yes.
The little ear candy. And you're like, huh? Why didn't I notice that before?
There's it's some, like, you're honing in on it.
In the background or something.
Yeah.
And you never noticed that before.
You're honing in on it, aren't you?
Yeah.
Because you know it. It's familiar to you.
Yeah, and it's sort of like that, but almost in reverse. Like...
And a chameleon on a background, I don't understand why you can't see the chameleon.
It's because it, like, basically just blends in. So it sits far enough away that you can't really make out details. Like when you get up close, you notice it. You're like, oh, yeah, that's a chameleon. But when it's far enough away, it's kind of like just a bit blurry.
Do you not see the outline?
No, because it blurs in. It just sits against a log or whatever it does. And then
Does it have to be the same texture, though?
Yeah, if the chameleon's like in its normal natural green state, you're going to go, oh, that's a chameleon.
Right.
But if it's in its, like, camouflage state, you just won't notice it. Like, they do, like, you see it with owls as well. They, like, hide in trees and then because they've matched the colours of the trees and the sort of texture, you just don't notice because they're far enough away.
Yeah.
So...
And have you got anything that I often say to you that you don't understand that I don't get?
Oh. I'd say, well, it would have been that tidying up one, I think.
Yeah.
Because you can't conceptualise that. Because
no.
It's just like, there.
I think that's often the most thing we talk about. The fact that I don't understand that you can't see things.
Oh, Olga's turned up.
Hello, Olgsy. I think that is a great time to end this vlog. Olgie, thank you, darling, for... It's a wrap, isn't it? You're the director today.
Oh, you've got very hot, haven't you?
I really hope you enjoyed this insight into visual things.
Yeah.
This is my lovely fiancé. Thank you, because you're a professional in all this stuff, so we needed your insight. Yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you next Wednesday for a new one. Bye.
Bye.